Yeah, so on the one hand, very much a formal government minister giving a presentation. On the other hand, not quite, like it used to be. What's
No,
your first thought?
sounds totally different in a lot of ways. I think the challenge for all of us is that that kind of participation has been talked about as a way of our current systems protecting themselves under a veneer of participation. I think what Audrey is referring to is a real embrace of the actual results, an openness to the actual results of actual participation. And that one of the challenges for that in all kinds of communities and all kinds of cultures and all kinds of countries is a real pervasive cynicism about whether leadership is actually willing or interested in listening to people. And I think this is where our posture, people who are running institutions and assemblies and ministries and institutions need to recognize that rebuilding trust and pushing back against that cynicism is an encouragement of faith, that we get to have faith in a healthier and different outcome as we think about a more generative future, is an invitation, but one that a lot of people are very suspicious of right now.
At the same time, I mean, I share all of those concerns. But one thing that I do find very inspiring is that here is a politician who has come to this role through an unconventional path. Because in one way, I tend to think that, oh, but like we have such urgency in a lot of the changes, so we're kind of stuck with the politicians we currently have. And of course, that's not actually how, at least in democracies, this works. Like we can actually exchange the politicians for like other humans who might have other approaches and like a bigger willingness to listen. But of course, that does take time. And then you also lose some institutional knowledge that is also very vital in keeping our processes
and the
going.
Time is tricky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned in your intro the sort of idea of the empathy fatigue, that is hard to sustain that kind of power and energy and demand all the time, especially when one of the really important things about a gathering like this is that building cohesion and coordination helps us break down the loneliness of working in social change. And that the fatigue and the burnout that comes from pushing against what feels like pushing molasses up a sandy hill, that's a little bit of a southern concept that may
pushing
not
syrup uphill. Up sand,
that one might not translate that well.
Yeah.
Is something that we need to keep doing together. And so the time, one of the challenges of sort of what we see of the acceleration of industrialization and social media and now technologies and artificial intelligences is that we feel like we don't have enough time to get to the next election cycle, that feels too far away. And people who are not interested in systems that are actually for all people, much less all beings, can do a lot of damage really quickly when they're in charge.
Yeah.
And so who's in charge matters quite a lot. But it's something we can change every day. But
like we individually don't have to actually be as deeply engaged in all of these processes. I feel like one of the many thoughts I had from your talk was that there are these two sort of directions. There's the sort of inner path, which is very much about breaking out of the anxiety of enoughness. And again, certainly like for people who are maybe struggling with that for the first time, that might be very much a process that they need to be working on. Like, what is enough for whom? How is that determined? And how do we determine that for ourselves? Like, what are the values that are involved? But then there's this other outer path, which is like how do we participate in the world? We can't be in every process, but that's okay because there's a lot of us.
There's a lot of us and a lot of lanes and a lot of work to do and a lot of effort. And I think about sort of this shift toward a more generative society, like turning a lighthouse. There are lots and lots of interlocking gears, all of which need pressure all the time in a sustained way, but each one is a handle for each one of us, right? And so we all put what effort we have into our gear and into the space, and we all slowly start to turn, and it puts us in a place where we can begin to do that work as part of just breathing, just being in the world in a way that is hopefully helps also push back against the burnout of transformation.
I've been thinking recently, I've been reading Rebecca Solnit, and I've been thinking about this idea that we don't have to, like, what is the end goal? That it's the process. We're going to be living in the process. And even if we were to fix all the problems in the world eventually, I wouldn't be there for it. So there is this really radical idea that comes from, in different variants, from many thinkers, which is, how about, like, imagine that we have already reached the goal, and then start living that as much as you can. Like, who would you be in that world? And then live that as much as you can today. And to me, that's an incredibly radical idea, that I wouldn't have to be miserable as an activist or as somebody who has a lot of worry.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And you're saying it's not actually my fault. It's just like a good 4 to 6 to 10,000 years of baggage that I need to divorce myself from, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the key to part of this, to that idea of acting as if, which has a lot of power and a lot of contexts, is you talked about people, some communities feeling this fear and uncertainty of enoughness, feeling unsafe, particularly about the future, the sense of futurelessness for the first time in a long time, is how we create safe bridges to start knitting this back together into a human process where we are safe to engage with the world with curiosity, to do this work in ways that trust that others will do their work, is starting to build, like, how we ask those who are safe to use that safety to create more safety for others. And that's a fundamental sort of process of bridging that is required in a society that has now had a lot of polarization and a lot of segregation pressure applied to it politically, algorithmically now for now a couple of decades, that our generations in this room are going to now need to slowly undo by accepting their responsibility of being bridges and safe spaces for other people.
And accepting that in all of these spaces and all of the groups of people and the workplaces and the class environments in your building and your neighborhood, there are a lot of people who, for different reasons, have never felt safe. And they're not paralyzed, you know? A lot of people, I'm trying to use vague pronouns for myself now in this context, but I mean, a lot of people, I think everybody has some experience of feeling not safe, and we have managed to muddle through, and some people have managed to, against insurmountable odds. So probably, if I'm a little bit worried now, like, I'll be fine, you know. So there's also something there about saying that action, but I mean, I think there is something that action is the key to unlock hope. Like, you do something, just do anything to make the world safe for more people, is going to make you hopeful.
And those people who have done that are the models that we need to look at for leadership.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And to elevate to leadership, because it's a pretty vital sort of experience as well. Yeah, have we set up 2 days of, like, massive questions in every direction, personal, governmental, societal? Yeah. I feel like we have set up a lot of questions and not provided a lot of answers, which is exactly what this first hour is meant to do. Your book is in the pop-up library, so people can grab you there to ask you more questions in the break. I'll just do some housekeeping, and then we will thank you again.